Hey everybody, good to see all of you today. I'm very excited to be with my dear friend Apostle Alexander Pagani, and we've known each other for a little bit back and forth, right?
Uh-huh.
And so we finally met in person
Face to
during
face.
face to face for Charisma, and we just had to do something together. And
Yeah.
so Apostle Pagani, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And as you mentioned, we kind of come from the same stream of churches, and we know the same people. And so every time me and him talk, either through text throughout the time that we've known each other, it's like a true camaraderie and a friendship. It's not like mechanical and
Yeah.
just organic. And I'm excited, man. But it's good to finally meet face to face. And oh my God, we have so much to talk
Yeah.
about, but we can only talk about a few things. But oh man, excited to be here, man.
Yeah, a lot of similarities. Like I was born in the Bronx, you're from the Bronx. We come from Pentecostal traditions, like
100%.
I was a part of Church of God in Florida, and then you came out of Church
I
of
was
God.
Church of God in New York City.
Yeah. So we have a lot of those
Pentecostal roots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. So like
on.
tell me about, like, if you want to share your testimony, where you came out of, and then like what led you into spreading your wings a little bit.
Deliverance.
Yeah, all of that. I want to know
stuff.
everything. Yeah.
Well, first and foremost, I'm not ashamed of my Pentecostal upbringing. And neither do I sense that from you. Every time we talk, it's an honor there. Obviously God had different things for us in mind, but I got saved in prison, and then I come home and my family attended, a normal traditional, we call it storefront Pentecostal church. Right?
Yep.
Man, let me tell you something. It was small, but they had fire. So I kind of was nurtured in the Lord under what we would call el movimiento de fuego.
Yeah.
The fire movement. Yeah. I don't even know if that's a thing now, but now
I know.
Right, talking about, so everything is the fire of God, you know what I'm saying? So it wasn't until maybe a couple of years later, as we grow, as well as yourself, that you begin to have a crash running with some of maybe the dogmas of the church that you either felt were either not biblical or maybe more man-made, which I don't think there's anything wrong with man-made rules, but just say that it's man-made, and this is what we do as an organization. So I think maybe after growing in the Pentecostal church, I became a pastor in a Pentecostal church. I took over my father-in-law's church, So, we grew in our Pentecostal denomination. So all of those things were great, never taking away any of that. They gave me my start. But as a pastor, one of our requirements is to become, biblically literate. Like that's the goal. So it's not just in apologetics, but just biblically literate. So as I began to study, that's when I began to have I had to do some soul searching. You know what I'm saying? We would kind of flesh that out.
Yeah.
So once I realized that maybe some of the tenets of the faith that I had that I thought were biblical tenets were actually more bylaws and policies of the Pentecostal movement. Through much prayer and fasting, I just felt that maybe it might have been time when I felt that I was ready to leave, but I left honorably.
Right.
They did give me the blessing. And to this day, I have nothing bad to say. I'm still great friends with all of them. Some of my former bishops actually have told me that, Pagani, you're one of my favorite internet preachers. Yeah. So that's good. But it ultimately led me to, it's been a progression of, hardcore Pentecostal theology. Then I went non-denomination.
Yeah.
We come out of non-denomination.
Yeah, same.
Right. But then as we mature, we find our lane.
Yeah.
And I crash course into kingdom, fivefold. And for me, that meant it connected all the dots for me, and that's what started me on this journey. And here we are later. And then we could kind of flesh out, the kingdom and the deliverance and all that stuff. But it led me to, I was threefold. And then I became fivefold.
That's right.
I became fivefold. And then it just made total sense to me. And I call fivefold full gospel. That's what I think full gospel.
Yeah, the
fully means the fullness of it. And it's been an absolute journey since then. And it's been like maybe 15 years that I left the Pentecostal church.
That's awesome.
A Latino Pentecostal. People don't know that I come from a Spanish only. I pastored a Spanish only church. Yep. And now I'm like in all the American churches. So yeah.
That's awesome because same with me. Like I went non-denominational Pentecostal, went through all sorts of different, movements. And I did find that it was really interesting because for me, I was like, man, there's something more.
Yes.
I feel like something's missing. I just can't put my finger on it. And, the office of the ministry gift of the pastor,
Right.
the evangelist, and the teacher is celebrated. But, I would read Ephesians 4 and I'm like, well, where's the apostles and where's the prophets?
Right.
I would see, prophets here and there, but it's like, that's not something that has been celebrated in its all totality.
Right.
But I believe like in the last, 10 years or so, that's been kind of God's doing a
I think
recovery.
because of social media, I think
Mhm.
social media has caused there to be a propagation and more of a tolerance or more an embrace
Right.
of the missing element of, apostle and
Right.
prophet.
Yeah. And the thing is like, I feel like, and it's not nothing against pastor run churches only.
No.
There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah, we're both pastors,
Yeah.
but when the model is just centered on pastor only, well, where are the other functions?
Right.
And I feel like I heard one man of God that I greatly respect say, a pastor can give 100% of his gift, but only fill 25% of the body. Whereas the rest of the other gifts
That's good.
of Christ,
That's
pour
good.
out,
That's real.
And so what led you into that? Like kingdom, talk to us about kingdom, and then the fivefold, and then how did you walk in that?
Okay, so first and foremost is exposure.
Mhm.
What I mean by exposure is, where we come from. It's not really celebrated to kind of go outside,
Mhm.
your inner circle,
your
your
tradition,
camp,
if you
your
wanna call it,
pond,
yeah.
and go. So when I began to fellowship with other churches, you can't help deny what you know that you see.
Yeah.
So I encountered real apostles who weren't title hungry, but you can see the apostolic grace there. And me not knowing what that even meant, my spirit would say, that's an apostle right there. Or you would meet a prophet who actually walked genuinely in the ministry gift of, the prophet, not just the gift of prophecy. In Pentecostal church, we have the gift of prophecy.
Right.
So we could recognize it. But I began to encounter certain prophets whose words never fell to the ground. It wasn't like emotionalism. We would go, oh, hit or miss. It fought against my theology. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. I know what I'm being told that doesn't exist or rarely exists, to now I'm seeing it in front of me, and you're left with no other choice but to make a decision. Do you embrace what you're seeing or do you reject it? So it took me about maybe 10 years to fully embrace it, because where we come from, you got test the spirit.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And amen, test the spirit. You got to see fruit. Of
Mhm.
course, you want to see fruit that remains. But what do you do and how do you handle when all of those check marks have been checked? You're left with no other choice but to do you embrace apostles and prophets? So I embraced it. Then came the next thing, the disappointment of how many years I went rejecting it. And then realizing that it hadn't left. We're not restoring anything. It just hadn't left. It's just that I was in this pond. So I went through a season of, it wasn't culture shock, but I was just culturally disappointed in what I was being taught. And I was like, man, if I would have embraced this a long time ago, I would be more far along in my understanding. So I think the first thing that I encountered, Chris, is this. I had to deal with that I was theologically in arrested development. Man, that was a hard pill to swallow. So I was already a pastor. When I embraced all this stuff, I had one of the fastest growing churches in the Bronx for the new generation. We had begun to embrace a little bit MySpace days, technology, MySpace, stuff like that. And then we had momentum. And then, like you and I, we grew in a denomination and they placed you in a church and then they promoted you. They actually called me the star of our denomination. So then now, I began contemplating, I think I got to go, because I began to question. And that's the great thing about being in the kingdom or being in the faith is that you can question, you can test. I began to not be questionable, just ask questions. Okay, where is that in the Bible? Where does it say this? Where does it say this? And I wasn't getting thorough biblical answers. So after that, when you do the embrace, you're left with the next logical thing or conclusion is this. Do I leave, or do I incorporate? So I tried to incorporate it into our church. I see you smiling because come on, talk to me, saying, oh my Lord, I went, me and my wife, oh Lord, we went through some of the most challenging yet fruitful, but challenging years to get the church to embrace one or two things that we felt like, oh man, we've been missing it here. Oh, we were just met with an immense amount of scrutiny and skepticism and hurt, So, but we got them to embrace it, but it was difficult.
Yeah.
It was difficult.
Oh, I know all about like trying to incorporate. One of the things we were going through a transition. We were mentioning this earlier before, but while I was going through a transition, you were going through a transition as well. And you said something on the phone with me that I'll never forget. You said a lot of pastors are like ministry dysmorphic.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Where it was like you try to
I said ministry dwarfism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you were talking about dysmorphia, like like
dysmorphia.
gender dysmorphia, but
ministry transgender.
Yes.
Ministry transgender.
Yeah. And what was going on? Like I was at a certain
Wow, I
church.
didn't know that ministered to you.
It did because I was a pastor, and no, we want it like this, and we want it this way, and that's it. You stay in that box.
Right.
But I started getting really frustrated because I'm like, I'm not wired this way.
Right.
So I started questioning, is there something wrong with me?
Come on.
And then when we got on the phone and you were talking to me about, you just kind of said it in passing, like, oh yeah, there's a lot of people with
ministry transgender.
Yeah, and I'm like,
they're apostles trapped in a pastor's body. Like when people that are struggling with sexual identity, they'll say, I'm this, but I'm trapped in this body.
Yes.
I said that a lot of people within the Christian church deal with that.
And what happened was when that was going on with me, it was really depressing because it was like, man, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get out of this. I tried as much to incorporate, but the same response was like, push back and no, people uncomfortable, feelings hurt, all of this stuff. And it's like, no, I had to make a decision.
Let me say this. The reason why you also and me, we had to leave is because we always think, and I don't know if maybe some of your viewers need to hear this, is sometimes we always think that we're going to be the guy
to save the day.
To save the day. Like Mighty Mouse, here I come to save the day. And then you find out you ain't saving nothing. You ain't saving nothing. You ain't saving nothing here. That was a harsh reality for me to wake up to because I genuinely thought I have favor here. I'm the star of the denomination, and maybe they did love me, or maybe they loved what I could bring to the denomination. And then I thought I got disillusioned, and so I think I'm going to be the guy to pioneer something new. And then it wasn't until I got the harsh reality of like, you're not pioneering anything. Legalism is a monster. And you're not changing anything. And that's when I began to realize I'm left with only one logical choice. Submit to it and get eaten up by the monster or run for my life. So I ended up making a tough call. And I actually stepped down from the church.
Wow.
I had a thriving church that they gave me. I was, we were growing, grew up the funds, grew up the membership, grew up influence. I mean, I put my heart and soul doing street services, winning people to the Lord, help people get saved, baptized, walking with them. And then I just felt like, I think I need to step down because this is not fair to them as the eldership of the church.
Right.
And it's not fair to me that I'm miserable. So I spoke with our denomination and, as usual, they were like, let's make it work. And I was like, no, I did it. I went as far as I think I did about maybe 6 years of that. And then eventually I gave it back. I gave it back with the funds high. I gave it back better than how I got it. Yeah. And then I launched Tears and Tabernacle initially, which was, they didn't want me to leave the denomination. So I didn't technically leave. I just launched an English service. And that turned into Here's the Tabernacle, that morphed into Amazing Church, that morphed into traveling the world doing deliverance and stuff like that. Yeah.
Wow. So how did you recover your apostolic calling? Like how did you go from that to like, there's something more here? Talk to me about that.
So a couple of things. I did have an encounter with the Lord Jesus Christ in prison. You know what I'm saying? Like I did have a supernatural encounter there. Even though in the New Testament, I don't think that's the main requirement, but that is a requirement that you had some type of encounter with the Lord. So everyone knows my story there. I had an idea while I was in prison. Now, the Lord didn't tell me you're going to be an apostle, but the Lord did tell me that I was going to oversee churches. That I knew, but I thought it was bishop.
Yeah.
And I remember clearly in 1994, maybe 2 years after being saved, I'm still in prison. And somebody asked me, what do you think your calling is? And I remember saying, I'm going to be a bishop. I'm going to have churches under me. I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know what churches. So I already, now that I look back, I go, wow, man, like God already had it in me. It wasn't until, like I told you, when I got exposed to the larger part of the body of Christ, and I began to incorporate it, what happened is I already started to move in it. So we started already doing our own water baptisms. People started getting saved. I started, like, my theology changed. People were growing. I had ministers coming into the church. Then I was already thinking about, man, I think we need to, we need to birth a church. You know what I'm saying? Like, what's going on? So I was already kind of like Moses. Remember when Moses killed the Egyptian? He was being a deliverer, but he was premature. I kind of went through something like that. Didn't kill anybody, but I was moving prematurely in things, though I knew I still had the calling. So when I initially departed from, I call it hyper Pentecostalism, and that's what it really what it was, and I began to get around others in the fivefold. Then what happened was I went from culture of fire, cultura de fuego, movimiento de fuego. I started calming down. And when I started calming down, I got rooted.
That's so good.
I got rooted. And then I departed from emotionalism. Like emotionalism left. You know how and nothing wrong with being emotional, but I kind of departed from that stuff. And then what happened is that I started having, like, dreams and visions again. And then things, and you know this, when you're not looking for it, it just comes to you. So now I'm having people like, hey, can you cover me? I need some advice. Can you mentor me? Back then it was mentor. It wasn't like spiritual father or anything like that. So it kind of started for me like that. But then when I got connected to a fivefold community, they gave context theologically to the language that was already happening. Before, it was just kind of like glyphs, like hieroglyphics, pictorials in my spirit, and then in the word, and then I'm just doing it. And it works, And then when they started, fine tuning that apostolic doctrine or whatever, then it made sense to me. So I went from like a wildfire to a laser. It's still the same. It's still fire. It's still energy. But instead of making room, like,
it's more focused.
It's focused, and I could cut through harder steel. And it made sense to me. Then after that, we just started seeing the fruit. So I went many years and let me just say this: we don't need the title; just be the function.
Yeah,
you don't need the title.
Yeah.
So I was already moving in that, doing birthing, like birth one church, and then we just still another church for like 10 years or something, like 6-7 years. And then eventually that's when I connected with like Tudor Bismarck and others, and then they were like, oh, we see that, now let's do a consecration, and it kind of meant it.
That's awesome.
Yes, it's a lot more. I'm condensing it, but when you start moving in it, then you don't need the extra validation. You just doing it. You're just doing it. And then you're like, oh, I'm just doing what I am. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So at this point, we've birthed, I think, been overseeing at least 16 churches.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so we got some churches.
Amazing
and we just yesterday took a Spanish church under our covering yesterday, so we can add that to 17,000.
That's amazing. I love it. And I think of like the Apostle Paul talking about legalism and crazy excesses that he saw in his day. And today in the body of Christ, we're seeing a lot of that, right?
Yeah.
And so I see this book that's under your hands right here. And I love what it says. It says, manipulated 10 toxic traits of legalism. Yeah. And it hasn't even come out yet, right?
No, this is the first copy.
So talk to us about
surprised me today with it.
Yeah.
Well, this is the culmination of everything that we're talking about, and it had to be when I moved out of New York, because while in New York, then, my previous denomination and others could probably think that I'm talking about them. No, I've already been healed from that. We still have a great relationship. So I've been able to take all those years of everything, the do's and don'ts of what I thought was walking in the fullness of the grace of God. I really found out that I was walking in maybe mild forms of legalism, or legalistic attachments, or rules and regulations that don't necessarily adhere to the gospel of Christ. Not sinful, but just an adoration of the rules that are designed to help us keep the rules.
Yeah, like weights. Yeah.
Yes, weights is probably a really good. I actually talk about that in the book. So I was able to take that and just help the average Christian recognize it, but then also how to break free from it. And then also for those who have been perpetuators of it, because I used to preach it.
Yeah.
So how do you go back on what you preached on? See what I'm saying? And how do you allow God to kind of like switch your theology on that, to upgrade it, not switch your theology, but upgrade it so it conforms itself to more of the gospel of Christ that the Apostle Paul preached and the early church preached. So that's what we did here, and it's a lot bigger than some of my previous books. No, it's not a deliverance book. It's not a deliverance book, but there is ways to get delivered from the spirit of religion in this book. So I'm really excited about it. So we have 10 chapters after well, it's actually 12 chapters, but 2 of them are how to get free. So I wrote it 10 in honor of the 10 commandments. So the law of Moses, I kind of connected
playing with that idea.
So I did that, and I'm excited. So this is the book, and I would hope that some of your followers that might be dealing with that, especially with stuff you talk about legalism and coming out of extreme Pentecostal churches. No bashing of the Pentecostal church here. No, actually honor them here, but actually revisit some of those things so that we could get a full view of what some of those revelations are.
And for me, like what kills a lot of the grace of the Spirit in our lives, especially in our pursuit with the presence of the Lord, is legalism. And so that legalism and identifying it and correcting it is so important.
100%.
Yeah. Where can we get a copy of this book? Or I know it's not ready yet, but
like a pre-order.
You can pre-order it.
You can pre-order it on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and go pre-order it now. The information will probably be linked in the description of the video.
I will.
It's available. It will be coming out October 21st. And this has been 20 years in the making, and already a lot of pastors and leaders. And I can't wait till it's translated in Spanish.
Oh, that's gonna be.
We've been talking about
You're putting your hand in the hornet's nest.
Already there. Right? I know, right? So yeah. So your followers and those that follow your channel can also follow us on YouTube. You know what I'm saying? They know what Alexander Pagani live, and I look forward to seeing you.
Apostle Pagani, thank you so much for having. Well, thanks so much for allowing me to come and talk with you.
Come on.
I look forward to doing more with you.
Of course.
In God's time. All right, friends. See you later. Like and share and subscribe to Apostle Pagani's channel. I'll go ahead and put all of the descriptions, the links in the descriptions, and get yourself a copy of this because I will too, and I'm going to enjoy reading that. So I'll see you next time.